Picture this, a bustling marketplace at the crossroads of the ancient world, where caravans laden with silk, spices, and gold converge under the watchful eyes of merchants speaking a dozen languages. This wasn't just a scene of commerce, it was the heartbeat of civilization itself. Trade didn't just move goods, it built empires, sparked revolutions in art and science, and turned modest settlements into dazzling metropolises that stood the test of time. These cities weren't just dots on a map, they were living, breathing networks where ideas and cultures collided, creating something far greater than the sum of their parts. And today, we're about to embark on a journey to uncover 35 of these extraordinary places, where the pulse of trade still echoes through their ruins and stories. Think about the last time you bought something, maybe a cup of coffee or a new pair of shoes. Now imagine that simple act multiplied by centuries across continents, shaping the very foundations of human progress. From the incense trails of Arabia to the silk routes of Asia, trade was the invisible hand that sculpted history. It brought distant worlds together, turning isolated towns into melting pots of innovation. These cities became stages where cultures performed a dance of exchange, leaving behind legacies of architecture, language, and technology that still awe us today. What made them thrive while others faded into obscurity? How did a single trade route elevate a humble village into a legendary capital? The answers lie in the stones of forgotten ports, the whispers of abandoned bazaars, and the ledgers of long-lost merchants. We're not just exploring ruins, we're stepping into the footprints of traders who dared to cross deserts and sail uncharted seas, stitching the world together one deal at a time. Each of these 35 cities has a tale that's equal parts ambition, ingenuity, and sheer human grit. Some names will sound familiar, legendary hubs like Petra or Carthage, while others might surprise you, hidden gems where commerce wrote history in ways you've never heard. So settle in, because this isn't just a list, it's a voyage to the places where trade didn't just shape economies, it shaped the course of humanity. Long before skyscrapers or shopping malls, there was Uruk, a maze of mud brick walls and canals sprawled between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. This wasn't just a settlement, it was humanity's first grand experiment in urban living, a place where trade transformed a riverbank village into a powerhouse of the ancient world. Picture the lifeblood of Mesopotamia, those twin rivers carrying not just water but opportunity. Farmers floated barley and wool downstream, while merchants hauled lapis lazuli from Afghanistan and cedar from Lebanon, all converging in Uruk's bustling docks. The city didn't just grow, it exploded, swelling to hold tens of thousands at a time when most humans lived in scattered tribes. What made Uruk extraordinary wasn't just its size, it was the blueprint it created. Here, traders needed a way to record deals, so scribes pressed reeds into clay tablets, inventing writing. Temples doubling as warehouses kept meticulous accounts, tracking sacks of grain and jars of oil, effectively birthing bureaucracy. Streets radiated outward from these temple complexes like spokes on a wheel, a design so effective that future cities from Babylon to Rome would copy it. Even Uruk's signature pottery, mass-produced in workshops and stamped with seals, became the ancient equivalent of a brand name, found as far away as Egypt and the Indus Valley. But perhaps the most lasting legacy was how Uruk turned geography into destiny. Nestled in the Fertile Crescent, it became a crossroads where Sumerian, Akkadian, and Elamite cultures collided, forging new ideas in the heat of commerce. A merchant could walk through its gates speaking one language and leave fluent in another, carrying not just goods but stories, recipes, and building techniques. When later cities like or Nineveh rose to prominence, they weren't just imitating Uruk, they were standing on the shoulders of a giant. The lesson was clear: connect people, and you don't just build a marketplace. You build civilization itself. Now, let's travel from the sun-baked streets of Uruk to the banks of the mighty Indus River, where another marvel of the ancient world rose from the silt, Mohenjo-Daro. Unlike Uruk's organic sprawl, this city was a masterpiece of precision-gridded streets laid out with almost mathematical perfection, brick houses with indoor plumbing, and a drainage system so advanced it wouldn't be rivaled for thousands of years. But what truly set Mohenjo-Daro apart wasn't just its engineering. It was how trade turned this planned city into a global player. Dig into the ruins and you'll find tiny soapstone seals carved with unicorns and script stamped onto bales of cotton bound for Mesopotamia. These weren't just labels, they were signatures of a sophisticated economy. Picture a merchant pressing his seal into clay, guaranteeing the quality of his goods, an early form of branding. Then there are the beads, carnelian from Gujarat, lapis from Afghanistan, even gold strands possibly threaded from Central Asia. Every artifact whispers the same story. Mohenjo-Daro wasn't just a city, it was a nexus. The genius of its trade network lay in redundancy. While Uruk relied on rivers, Mohenjo-Daro's merchants mastered both land and sea. Coastal settlements like Lothal funneled goods from the Arabian Sea upriver, while overland caravans wound through mountain passes. This wasn't just commerce, it was risk management. When monsoon rains disrupted one route, another could keep the city thriving. Yet for all its wealth, Mohenjo-Daro leaves us with haunting questions. Why no palaces or grand temples? Why no evidence of kings? Perhaps the answer is in those very artifacts. A seal found in Mesopotamia bears the same unicorn motif as those in the Indus Valley, proof that trade wasn't just about goods but shared symbols. Maybe Mohenjo-Daro's power didn't rest on a throne, but in the collective ingenuity of its people, their lives woven together by the threads of commerce. On the shores of North Africa, where the Mediterranean sparkles under relentless sun, rose a city built not just on trade but on sheer audacity: Carthage. Founded by Phoenician settlers fleeing the rocky coasts of modern-day Lebanon, this wasn't just another colony, it was a calculated masterstroke. Picture the scene: a natural bay transformed into a circular harbor so ingenious it became the envy of the ancient world. Merchants docked in the outer ring, their hulls stuffed with Spanish silver and African ivory, while the inner sanctum housed a fleet of warships because Carthage understood that true power meant controlling both commerce and the seas that carried it. What set Carthage apart wasn't just its location but its ruthless efficiency. Phoenicians had always been the mediators of the Mediterranean, but here they perfected the art. Take Tyrian purple, a dye so rare it took 12,000 crushed sea snails to produce a single ounce. Carthaginian merchants turned this crimson luxury into a status symbol for emperors and priests, weaving a monopoly so tight that rivals couldn't compete. Then there was silver, mined from Iberian hills and stamped with Carthage's crescent moon, a currency that bankrolled empires. But every superpower breeds jealousy, and Rome watched with growing unease. The Punic Wars weren't just battles, they were clashes of economic ideologies. Rome's legions marched for conquest, but Carthage fought for something subtler: the right to keep its trade networks alive. Even Hannibal's legendary trek across the Alps with war elephants was at its core a desperate gamble to protect supply lines. Yet perhaps Carthage's true legacy lies in its ghost. When Rome finally razed the city, they sowed the earth with salt, or so the story goes, a symbolic curse against commerce itself. But salt couldn't erase the lesson Carthage taught the world: that trade isn't just about goods, but the invisible threads of influence they carry. Long after the harbors silted up, the idea survived. In Venice, in Amsterdam, in every port city that dared to dream big. Carthage didn't just dominate the Mediterranean. It wrote the playbook for how trade builds empires and how quickly the tides can turn against even the mightiest of them. High on a hill crowned with marble temples, Athens seemed destined for greatness, but its true power lay not in the Acropolis, but deep underground in the silver-laced tunnels of Laurion. Just 30 miles south of the city, slaves toiled by lamplight, chiseling out the ore that would bankroll an empire of the mind. Each drachma struck from this silver carried a hidden message. Commerce doesn't just fund armies, it fuels revolutions in art, thought, and governance. When the Persians threatened Greece in the 5th century before the Common Era, Athens didn't just rally warriors, it minted coins, building a navy so vast it could dominate the Aegean. But silver was only the beginning. Down at Piraeus, the three-pronged harbor bristled with ships unloading Egyptian papyrus, Sicilian grain, and Black Sea timber. Walk its docks and you'd hear a cacophony of languages, Phrygian sailors haggling over amphorae of Thracian wine, Phoenician merchants unpacking bolts of Tyrian purple for wealthy patrons. This wasn't just a port, it was a sensory overload that reshaped Greek culture. The philosopher Anaxagoras arrived on such a ship from Anatolia, bringing revolutionary ideas about the cosmos. The vibrant reds and blues in Athenian pottery, those came from minerals traded with Persia, turning vases into storytelling canvases. Yet Athens' real trade secret was intangible. Alongside spices and metals flowed something far more precious, knowledge. When a ship from Rhodes carried a parcel of Egyptian geometry scrolls, it didn't just fill a library, it gave Euclid the tools to shape mathematics for millennia. Persian astronomical records, Phoenician navigation charts, even Indian fables, all converged here, fermenting into the explosive creativity we call the Golden Age. The lesson was clear. While Sparta hoarded land, Athens traded ideas, turning its agora into a marketplace of philosophies where Socrates could barter wisdom as briskly as a fishmonger sold his catch. Every statue, every play, every debate about democracy owed something to those ships rocking in Piraeus harbors. Trade didn't just make Athens rich, it made it unforgettable. Tyre was born from the sea, a strip of land so narrow it seemed to defy geography. But what this Phoenician city lacked in size, it made up for in sheer ingenuity. Imagine a marketplace where the air itself carried the briny scent of murex shells, piled high as workers cracked them open to harvest drops of viscous liquid. It wasn't just dye, it was royalty in a bottle. A single pound of Tyrian purple required crushing nearly 250,000 of these mollusks, a process so labor-intensive that the color became synonymous with power. Roman senators edged their togas with it, and biblical kings draped themselves in its hues because in the ancient world, Tyre didn't just sell a product, it sold prestige. Yet the true genius of Tyre lay beneath the waves. While other cities clung to safe harbors, Tyrian engineers built artificial breakwaters, creating the first deep seaport capable of handling ships year-round. Their vessels weren't just boats, they were floating blueprints, with reinforced hulls and curved sterns designed to weather Mediterranean storms. They became the 18-wheelers of antiquity. A Tyrian shipwreck off the coast of Malta still holds ceramic jars stuffed with everything from Cypriot copper to Sicilian almonds, a time capsule of a supply chain that spanned the known world. But Tyre's most audacious export wasn't goods, it was cities. Like a franchise spreading its brand, Tyre planted colonies from Cadiz to Carthage, each one a self-sustaining node in a vast commercial network. Picture a merchant in Gadea, modern-day Cadiz, bartering for British tin, then shipping it back to Tyre to be alloyed into bronze, all under the same trade agreements, the same quality standards. This wasn't just business, it was globalization's first draft. When Alexander the Great laid siege to Tyre in 332 before the Common Era, he didn't just face walls, he faced an economic superorganism. The Tyrians moved their entire operation offshore, resisting for 7 months from an island stronghold until Alexander built a causeway out of rubble. His victory was Pyrrhic. The real Tyre, the web of trade routes and loyal colonies, outlasted its physical shell. Long after the city fell, Phoenician purple still stained the robes of emperors, and Tyrian ship designs influenced navies for centuries. The lesson was clear: you could conquer a city, but you couldn't sink an idea. Alexander needed a capital worthy of his empire, but what he left behind on Egypt's wind-swept coast became something far greater, a city where knowledge itself was the most valuable commodity. At the crossroads of three continents, Alexandria wasn't just another conquest. It was a masterstroke of urban alchemy, blending Greek ambition with Egyptian tradition and stitching together the intellectual wealth of the known world. Picture the scene: marble quays sprawling along the Mediterranean, where Phoenician traders unloaded cedar for shipbuilding beside Indian merchants unpacking crates of pepper and pearls. Above it all loomed the Pharaohs, its mirror reflecting sunlight by day and fire by night, not just guiding ships, but declaring this city the beating heart of global exchange. The secret to Alexandria's dominance wasn't just its prime location, it was how it weaponized curiosity. The Great Library wasn't a quiet hall of scrolls, it was a frenetic marketplace of ideas. Scholars scribbled notes beside docks where sailors bartered star charts from Babylon for Egyptian geometry texts. One shipment from Rhodes might carry Euclid's latest theorems, while the next held silk-wrapped medicinal herbs from China, each fueling breakthroughs in everything from astronomy to surgery. Even the grain fleets hauling wheat to Rome carried something intangible, an exchange of agricultural techniques that would reshape Mediterranean farming for centuries. Yet the true genius lay in Alexandria's tolerance. Walk its streets in the 3rd century before the Common Era, and you'd hear Aramaic haggling over linen prices, Greek philosophers debating in shaded colonnades, and Egyptian priests translating hieroglyphs for foreign scholars. The city didn't just allow diversity, it thrived on it. When Ptolemy I commissioned Greek translations of Hebrew scriptures, or when Eratosthenes calculated Earth's circumference using reports from Seen's wells, they proved a revolutionary truth. Trade routes carry more than spices, they carry perspectives. Rome might have relied on Alexandria's grain, but the world relied on its mind. The same harbor that shipped wheat to feed 500,000 Romans also dispatched treatises that would outlast empires. Long after the lighthouse crumbled and the library burned, Alexandria's real legacy endured the unshakable belief that when goods move freely, so do ideas, and that the most prosperous cities aren't just storehouses of gold, but crucibles of human genius. The desert wind howls through sheer cliffs of rose-red stone, carving intricate patterns into rock faces, but this was no natural wonderland. It was a carefully calculated fortress of commerce, built by nomads who turned water scarcity into a superpower. Petra didn't just rise in the Jordanian desert, it defied it. The Nabateans weren't merely traders, they were hydrological wizards. While rivals struggled to cross the arid wastes, they engineered a network of dams, cisterns, and ceramic pipes so precise that their city gushed with fountains even during droughts. Every drop was a weapon, and they wielded it masterfully. Picture a caravan approaching Petra's hidden entrance, the Sick, a narrow gorge flanked by towering cliffs. As the scent of frankincense and myrrh thickens the air, merchants brace for the spectacle ahead. Then, through a sliver of sunlight, the treasury's facade emerges, its columns and statues chiseled directly into the rock. This wasn't just architecture, it was a billboard. By showcasing wealth so boldly, the Nabateans announced to every trader, "Here, in this unforgiving wilderness, you'll find safety, water, and unimaginable profits. Control the water, and you control the trade." That simple truth fueled Petra's dominance over the incense routes stretching from southern Arabia to the Mediterranean. Myrrh harvested in Yemen, frankincense from Oman, all passed through Nabatean hands taxed at every turn. Their secret, a web of way stations with hidden reservoirs spaced precisely a day's camel ride apart. Rival merchants either paid their tolls or risked death by thirst. Yet Petra's true brilliance lay in its illusions. From the outside, it appeared impregnable, a maze of canyons concealing its wealth. Inside, it thrived as a cosmopolitan hub. Greek sculptures adorned Nabatean tombs, Egyptian motifs blended into temple designs, and Aramaic, the lingua franca of trade, echoed through its colonnaded streets. Even their currency told a story, coins minted with the image of their king alongside Tyche, the Greek goddess of fortune, signaling their dual identity as desert power brokers and Hellenistic players. When Rome finally absorbed Petra in the 1st century of the Common Era, it wasn't through military defeat, it was economics. The empire shifted trade routes to the sea, and the Nabateans, ever adaptable, became Roman citizens. But walk the sick at dawn today, and you'll still feel their legacy. The morning sun ignites the cliffs into molten hues, revealing grooves where countless caravan ropes once wore down the stone. Petra's lesson endures. In the harshest landscapes, ingenuity doesn't just survive, it thrives, turning obstacles into empires. Rising from the Syrian desert like a mirage, Palmyra was Rome's wild card, a city that danced between two worlds with effortless grace. Picture a caravan emerging from the dusty horizon, its camels laden with Chinese silk and Persian carpets, heading straight for a metropolis where Corinthian columns stood shoulder to shoulder with ornate Parthian arches. This wasn't just a trading post, it was a cultural chameleon, fluent in the languages of both empire and bazaar. While other cities bowed to Rome or Parthia, Palmyra played them against each other, carving out a kingdom of its own in the spaces between. At the heart of this balancing act were the Palmyran merchants, opportunists who turned desert isolation into an unbeatable advantage. They didn't just transport goods, they rewrote the rules. When Rome's wars disrupted overland routes, Palmyran caravans sliced through the desert on shortcuts only they knew, charging astronomical fees for safe passage. A single tariff inscription found in the ruins lists taxes on everything from Arabian perfumes to Indian gems, revealing a system so meticulous it could rival modern customs offices. But their real power lay in diplomacy. A merchant might wear a toga to negotiate with Roman officials one day, then switch to flowing Parthian robes for a deal with Persia the next, a sartorial sleight of hand that kept profits flowing. Then there was Zenobia, the queen who looked at Rome's might and saw not an invincible empire but a ledger of vulnerabilities. Educated in Greek philosophy and fluent in multiple languages, she didn't just inherit Palmyra's throne, she weaponized its hybrid identity. When she marched her armies to conquer Egypt in 270 of the Common Era, it wasn't mere ambition, it was economic calculus. Controlling the Nile's grain meant holding Rome by its stomach. Her court became a vibrant echo of Palmyra itself, Syrian soothsayers conversing with Athenian scholars, while Roman defectors drilled her troops in legionary tactics. Yet Palmyra's greatest strength was also its undoing. The same cultural fluidity that made it rich sowed distrust in Rome's corridors of power. When Emperor Aurelian finally crushed Zenobia's revolt, he didn't just raze the city's temples, he erased its memory, melting down its gold statues into coins stamped with his victory. But the desert preserves what empires try to bury. Today, the surviving colonnades still stretch toward the horizon like skeletal fingers, their shadows tracing the paths of long-vanished caravans. Palmyra's lesson endures. In the spaces between superpowers, there's always room for those clever enough to build bridges and bold enough to burn them. Perched at the razor's edge of Europe and Asia, where the Bosphorus Strait stitches two continents together, Constantinople didn't just occupy a strategic location, it defied geography itself. What began as a modest Greek fishing village called Byzantium would be reborn as the jewel of empires thanks to one man's vision. Emperor Constantine didn't just rename the city in 330 of the Common Era. He reshaped it into a choke point for global commerce, a place where the wealth of 3 continents pooled like water in a basin. The Golden Horn wasn't merely a harbor, it was a masterclass in urban engineering. Picture a natural estuary shaped like a curved scimitar, its deep waters sheltered from storms by hills on either side. Here, ships from Alexandria unloaded Egyptian grain beside Venetian galleys stuffed with Slavic furs, while Persian merchants haggled over crates of indigo dye. The secret, Constantinople's chain, a colossal iron barrier stretched across the harbor mouth during sieges, proving that the city's real power lay not just in receiving trade but controlling it. Then there was the Silk. While Rome's Western Empire crumbled, Constantinople became the terminus of the Silk Road's most lucrative branch. Byzantine emperors didn't just buy Chinese silk, they hoarded the very knowledge of its making. For centuries, they guarded the secret of sericulture so fiercely that spies caught smuggling silkworms faced execution. The result, robes woven with gold thread for European royalty, ecclesiastical vestments that glittered like liquid sunlight, and a monopoly so absolute that Byzantine silks became currency in marriage alliances between kingdoms. But no discussion of Constantinople's trade dominance is complete without Greek fire. Imagine the terror of enemy fleets watching streams of liquid flame cling to their ships, burning even on water. This napalm-like substance, shot through bronze tubes mounted on warships, wasn't just a weapon, it was an economic insurance policy. By safeguarding the sea lanes to the Black Sea's grain fields and the spice routes to India, Greek fire ensured that Constantinople's markets never emptied. The city's true genius, though, lay in its layers. Walk its streets during the 10th century, and you'd hear Armenian moneychangers calculating interest rates in one quarter, Viking mercenaries rustling with furs in another, and Syriac scholars translating ancient Greek texts into Arabic. The Hagia Sophia's dome wasn't just an architectural marvel, it was a beacon announcing that here, at the crossroads of the world, every culture could find a home. Even after the Ottomans conquered the city in 1453, they couldn't erase its commercial DNA. The Grand Bazaar that rose in its heart was simply Constantinople's final evolution, proving that while empires may fall, the magnetism of a perfectly placed trading hub never fades. Venice didn't just rise from the water, it defied it. Imagine a scatter of muddy islets in a brackish lagoon, where refugees fleeing barbarian invasions hacked wooden pilings into the seabed, layering them with limestone until something miraculous happened. A city emerged where no city should exist. This wasn't just survival, it was alchemy. By the 12th century, those soggy foundations supported a metropolis whose wealth rivaled kingdoms, all because Venice mastered two deceptively simple commodities, salt and spices. The genius began with geography. Nestled at the top of the Adriatic, Venice became the pivot point between East and West, but its real breakthrough was institutional. While feudal Europe drowned in hierarchies of knights and serfs, Venetian merchants invented something radical, a republic where power flowed from trade, not birthright. The Doge wasn't a hereditary monarch but an elected CEO of a maritime corporation. Their currency, the ducat, became the medieval equivalent of the US dollar, trusted from Cairo to Constantinople because its gold content never wavered. Then came the spices. A single Venetian galley returning from Alexandria could carry enough pepper to buy a palace, but the real innovation lay in how they managed risk. Merchants pooled capital into shares, spreading exposure across voyages, an early form of stock markets. Need a loan, the Rialto's banks pioneered double-entry bookkeeping, turning Venice into Europe's first financial hub. Even their shipbuilders revolutionized trade. The arsenal's assembly line could produce a warship in a day, their standardized design so precise that hulls could be swapped like Lego blocks. Yet Venice's darkest secret was its ruthless pragmatism. When the Fourth Crusade stalled in 1204, Venetian bankers didn't just fund it, they hijacked it, diverting crusaders to sack Christian Constantinople and carve up its trade routes. The loot included the 4 bronze horses now glaring down from St. Mark's Basilica, symbols of a city that worshipped commerce as others worshipped saints. What truly set Venice apart, though, was its spy network. Merchants doubled as intelligence agents, smuggling not just silks but secrets. A report from a Venetian factor in Damascus about Mamluk troop movements could mean the difference between a spice monopoly and bankruptcy. Their archives still hold ciphered letters proving trade wasn't just about goods, It was an information war. Walking Venice today, you can still trace this legacy in the Fondaco dei Tedeschi, where German merchants were required to live under surveillance, or the Jewish ghetto, originally a copper smelting district turned financial hub. Even the city's labyrinthine layout was a defense mechanism, a maze to confuse invaders now enchanting tourists. Venice didn't just adapt to its limitations, it weaponized them, proving that when you control the channels of exchange, you don't need an empire. You become one. Across the Mississippi River, where the morning mist still clings to the earth like a forgotten memory, lies a mystery that reshapes everything we thought we knew about ancient North America. Cahokia wasn't just a settlement, it was a sprawling metropolis that rivaled London in population at its peak around 1100 of the Common Era. Picture a skyline not of steel and glass, but of earthen mounds stretching toward the heavens, their flat summits crowned with temples where priests kept watch over a city buzzing with traders, artisans, and pilgrims. This wasn't just the heart of the Mississippian culture. It was the Manhattan of its time, a hub where goods and ideas flowed along river highways stretching from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico. What makes Cahokia extraordinary isn't just its scale, it's the precision behind its rise. The city's centerpiece, Monk's Mound, rises 100 feet high. Its 4 terraces built with over 22 million baskets of dirt, all hauled by hand. But the real marvel lies in what archaeologists found buried within. Layers of colored soil imported from miles away, arranged with ritual care. This wasn't just construction, it was alchemy, transforming earth into something sacred. Surrounding the mounds stood a wooden stockade nearly 2 miles long, studded with defensive bastions, proof that even in a trading paradise, power needed protection. The lifeblood of Cahokia pulsed through its waterways. Canoes hewn from massive sycamores plied the Mississippi, carrying copper mined near Lake Superior, shimmering sheets of mica from the Appalachians, and seashells from the Gulf Coast transformed into ritual cups. These weren't mere commodities, they were spiritual currency. A conch shell engraved with a winged serpent might travel 1,000 miles to grace a chief's burial, while nuggets of native copper, pounded into ceremonial plates, became the ultimate status symbol. The city's craftsmen turned these materials into masterpieces, their workshops producing everything from intricately knotted fishing nets to effigy pipes carved in the likeness of otherworldly creatures. Yet Cahokia's greatest trade wasn't in objects, it was in influence. Artifacts found as far away as Wisconsin and Oklahoma bear the unmistakable stamp of Cahokian design. The cross and circle motif symbolizing the cosmos, the distinctive Ramey knife style copied by distant cultures. Even its games spread like wildfire. Chunky, a contest where stone discs were rolled across polished courts, became a continental obsession, with gambling stakes so high losers might walk away shirtless in winter. This cultural tsunami didn't happen by accident. Cahokia's rulers likely sent envoys downriver, forging alliances through gifts and marriages, turning distant villages into willing partners in a vast economic web. Then, around the 14th century, the city emptied. The reasons still elude us, perhaps overpopulation strained resources, or a prolonged drought shattered faith in the rulers who claimed to control the reins. But Cahokia's legacy lingers in the indigenous nations of the southeast, whose ancestral stories still whisper of a time when their ancestors walked the streets of a city that defied the wilderness. Today, as archaeologists sift through the soil of Mound 72, where a man was buried on a bed of 20,000 shell beads alongside sacrificial retainers, one truth becomes clear. Long before European ships touched these shores, North America had its own vision of civilization, built not on conquest but on the irresistible pull of trade and shared belief. Under the scorching Saharan sun, where golden dunes stretched toward infinity, an oasis of knowledge once thrived in the most improbable of places, Timbuktu. This wasn't just a pit stop for parched travelers. It was the Harvard of the desert, a city where literacy was as precious as the gold nuggets traded in its markets. Picture this: camel caravans lumbering in from the north, their saddlebags bursting with slabs of salt so vital they were exchanged weight for weight with gold. Meanwhile, scholars huddled in the shade of the Sankor Mosque, their ink-stained fingers turning pages of astronomical treatises and legal commentaries that would rival any library in medieval Europe. The secret to Timbuktu's intellectual explosion lay in its geographic irony. Sandwiched between the Niger River's life-giving floodplains and the Sahara's unforgiving expanse, it became the ultimate middleman. Tuareg nomads brought salt mined from the desert's heart, a mineral so crucial it preserved food, seasoned diets, and even served as currency. From the south came gold, extracted from the bambuk mines and carried north to Mediterranean markets. But the real treasure wasn't just metallic, it was the ideas that hitched a ride on these trade routes. A single caravan might transport leather-bound volumes of Arabic poetry alongside bolts of Sudanese cotton, their contents as valuable as the cargo they accompanied. At its peak in the 16th century, Timbuktu boasted over 180 schools and libraries, some holding collections that dwarfed Europe's finest. The manuscripts themselves were marvels, pages of hand-copied geometry texts with marginal notes in Songhai dialects, medical manuals detailing cataract surgeries performed centuries before they became common elsewhere, even star charts blending Islamic astronomy with local cosmological beliefs. These weren't static relics, they were working documents debated in open-air classrooms where students from as far as Morocco and Egypt rubbed shoulders with Fulani herders and Sonic merchants. Yet Timbuktu's brilliance was almost its undoing. When Moroccan invaders sacked the city in 1591, they weren't just after gold. They targeted the scholars themselves, deporting intellectuals to Marrakesh like living libraries. The city never fully recovered its academic glory, but its legacy endured in the most extraordinary way. Families hid manuscripts in chests, buried them in desert caves, or walled them into homes, preserving them through centuries of upheaval. Today, over 700,000 of these texts survive, some recently digitized, revealing a sophistication that rewrites colonial narratives of African history. Walk the dusty streets of modern Timbuktu and you'll still sense the echoes. The Jingraba Mosque's distinctive scaffolding, said to have been designed by an Andalusian architect paid in salt, still stands. The very air seems to hum with whispered equations and legal arguments from centuries past. This was a city that proved trade isn't just about wealth, it's about what happens when caravans carry not just goods, but the restless curiosity of humanity itself. Rising from the African savanna like a mirage of stone, Great Zimbabwe defies every stereotype about pre-colonial Africa. This wasn't some scattered village, it was an architectural marvel, its dry stone walls curving with such precision that not even a blade of grass could slip between the granite blocks. Picture the scene: atop a hill overlooking fertile plains, an 800-year-old citadel stands guard over the ruins of a bustling marketplace below. The air hums with the clink of gold weights being measured, the earthy scent of traded ivory, and the sharp tang of ocean salt carried inland by Swahili merchants. What makes these ruins extraordinary isn't just their scale, it's what they represent. While Europe languished in the Middle Ages, Great Zimbabwe mastered an economic system stretching thousands of miles. Arab coins minted in Kilwa, shards of Chinese celadon pottery, even glass beads from India, all found their way here, proof of a trade network as sophisticated as any Silk Road. The city's lifeblood was gold, panned from rivers like the Limpopo and traded through coastal ports like Sofala. Archaeologists have found ingot molds and crucibles showing the Zimbabweans didn't just export raw ore. They smelted it into standardized bars, a primitive form of currency trusted across the Indian Ocean. But the real genius lay in logistics. Unlike desert caravans reliant on camels, Great Zimbabwe leveraged geography. Its position between gold fields and coast created a natural funnel, while rainy season floods formed temporary waterways perfect for moving heavy loads. The city's rulers didn't just tax this trade, they controlled it, stationing agents at key points along the routes. A single trading mission might involve Shona miners, Swahili middlemen, and Arab dhow captains, each link in the chain greased by a shared understanding. Zimbabwe's gold opened doors from Persia to Canton. The most tantalizing clues come from the ruins themselves. The famous conical tower wasn't just decorative, its alignment matches the moon cycles, suggesting a calendar for planning trade missions with monsoon winds. Nearby, soapstone carvings of birds perched on ziggurats hint at connections with distant Mesopotamia. Even the city's layout reveals savvy. Elite residences clustered near the great enclosure, their walls embedded with shards of imported glass, medieval status symbols announcing their owners' global connections. Yet Great Zimbabwe's greatest legacy might be its silence. When Portuguese explorers arrived in the 16th century, they found only empty stone halls, the civilization having mysteriously declined centuries earlier. Some blame overgrazing, others shifting trade routes, but perhaps the real lesson is more profound. In a world where gold still glitters, these ruins remind us that true wealth isn't measured in coin, but in the ability to bring distant worlds together, and the wisdom to know when it's time to walk away. Emerging from the jungles of Cambodia like a dream carved in stone, Angkor was more than a city, it was a hydrological miracle. Picture this, an urban sprawl larger than modern-day Paris, its streets not paved with cobblestones but with water. Canals snaked through neighborhoods, reservoirs stretched for miles, and rice paddies glittered like emerald stepping stones across the landscape. This wasn't just infrastructure, it was alchemy, turning monsoon rains into liquid gold. The Khmer Empire didn't just grow rice, they weaponized it, engineering surpluses so vast they bankrolled temples that still stagger the imagination. At the heart of this system lay the Barre colossal man-made lakes acting as both spiritual symbols and economic engines. The West Barre alone held over 50 million cubic meters of water, channeled through a network of dikes and sluice gates so precise farmers could plant 3 rice crops a year while Europe struggled with 1. These weren't just granaries, they were power plants. Every bushel of surplus grain paid for armies of laborers hauling sandstone from quarries 40 miles away, their sweat crystallizing into the towers of Angkor Wat. The temple's bas-reliefs tell the story, not just gods and kings, but Chinese merchants unloading porcelain, Cham warriors offering tribute, and Dayak tribesmen from distant islands presenting hornbill casks, exotic forest products that flowed to Angkor like tributary streams. Yet the real secret lay in Angkor's silent partners, the monsoon and the Mekong. Seasonal floods replenished the Barres, while the Tonle Sap Lake performed a magical reversal, swelling to 6 times its dry season size and becoming the world's most productive freshwater fishery. The Khmers didn't fight nature, they choreographed with it, creating a rhythm where temple construction peaked during the dry season when farm labor was idle. Even their gods reflected this symbiosis. Vishnu slept not on a cosmic ocean, but on the coiled body of a Naga, the serpent spirit of Cambodia's life-giving waters. Angkor's decline holds a bitter irony. Recent LiDAR scans reveal how their hydrological mastery sowed the seeds of collapse. Canals silted up from deforestation, while over-engineered waterworks grew too complex to maintain. The final blow may have been a shift in global trade when Chinese Ming Dynasty ships began bypassing Southeast Asia for direct routes to India. The flow of silver and silks dried up. But walk through Angkor Thom's gates at dawn, and you'll see their legacy in the moss-covered faces of the Bayon, still smiling serenely over a lesson as old as civilization. Build with nature, not against it, and even a jungle will yield its treasures. The air in Calicut hung thick with the peppery bite of history itself, a scent so potent it could make a sailor weep before he even sighted the Malabar coast. This wasn't just a port, it was the Spice Age's Wall Street, where fortunes were made and empires decided by the weight of black gold in a merchant's sack. Long before Vasco da Gama's ships cast shadows on these shores in 1498, the city's markets had hummed with a linguistic symphony, Arabic haggling over cardamom, Tamil brokers assessing ginger quality, Chinese agents bartering for cinnamon sticks as fragrant as buried treasure. What set Calicut apart wasn't merely its abundance of pepper vines creeping up jungle trees, but a system of trust so refined it put European feudalism to shame. Local rulers, the Zamorans, enforced strict codes: falsify a spice's weight and you'd lose a hand, cheat on quality and your entire clan faced exile. This brutal fairness created something extraordinary, a marketplace where Jewish spice dealers from Baghdad could share ledgers with Hindu growers and Muslim ship captains, all bound by the sacredness of the contract. The city's very name became synonymous with quality. When medieval European cooks demanded Malabar pepper, they meant only one origin. The harbor told the story in wooden poetry. Chinese junks with bat-wing sails dwarfed Arab dhows, their holds stuffed with porcelain and sandalwood for the return trip. Beneath coconut-thatched warehouses, workers sifted pepper berries across woven mats, separating grades with ritual precision. First-class Telecherry peppercorns, plump and oil-rich, went into sealed clay jars for sultans and popes, while smaller berries fed Europe's growing middle class. Even the waste had value. Crushed pepper stems became medicine, and the dust fueled early forms of tear gas used in coastal defenses. Then came the Portuguese. Da Gama's arrival wasn't a meeting of cultures, it was a collision. Where Arab traders had blended into Calicut's rhythms for centuries, the Europeans demanded monopolies. The Zamorin famously scoffed at their crude trade goods, woolen garments and wash basins, while his attendants secretly marveled at the foreigners' cannon. The cultural disconnect was stark. Hindu merchants recoiled at Portuguese insistence on kissing the Bible to seal deals, while Europeans misinterpreted the Zamorins' vegetarianism as weakness. Within decades, this clash of commercial philosophies would ignite naval battles where Arab and Indian fleets fought to preserve the ancient spice networks against European hunger for control. Yet Calicut's true legacy lingers not in battles or ledgers, but in a single overlooked artifact, the caul, the bronze weight used to measure pepper for over a millennium. Unearthed specimens, now museum pieces, bear inscriptions in 3 scripts and wear grooves from countless transactions. In these silent discs lies the city's lesson: trade thrives not through force but through the delicate balance of mutual need. Long after empires shifted and ports silted up, that principle endured in the pepper-laced breeze still rolling off the Malabar coast, and in the taste of every peppercorn that still carries the memory of a time when the world's wealth was measured in spice. Marco Polo stood on the arched back of a stone bridge, his Venetian eyes struggling to take in the spectacle before him, a metropolis so vast it made his hometown seem like a fishing village. This was Hangzhou in the 13th century, the beating heart of the Song dynasty, where 12,000 bridges stitched together canals thronged with barges carrying every imaginable treasure. Beyond dispute the finest and noblest city in the world, he would later write, and for once the man prone to exaggeration might have understated the truth. What made Hangzhou extraordinary wasn't just its scale, it was the sheer sophistication of its daily rhythms. At dawn, the city awoke to the clatter of wooden tally sticks as merchants settled accounts with the world's first widespread paper money. Unlike the heavy coinage of Europe, these crisp banknotes printed with intricate seals and threats of execution for counterfeiters flowed through the economy like water. Tea merchants stacked bricks of fermented leaves into pyramids, their value calibrated by imperial inspectors. Silk workshops hummed with the whir of spinning wheels, where girls with fingers stained by dye vats produced fabrics so translucent they could vanish in a closed fist. The Grand Canal was Hangzhou's lifeline, a watery highway stretching over 1,000 miles to Beijing. Picture the traffic: grain barges from the Yangtze Delta gliding past floating restaurants serving delicate Westlake carp, while imperial couriers on slim express boats shouted for right-of-way. Along the shores, firewatch towers stood sentinel over tiled rooftops, their guards armed with buckets of water and rattles to sound alarms, an early form of urban insurance for a city built on wood and paper. But the real magic lay in the markets. Marco Polo marveled at streets dedicated to single commodities, pearl sellers here, rhinoceros horn vendors there. Each guild headquartered in its own neighborhood. The most fascinating were the hunger alleys, where night markets served steaming bowls of congee to late-night scholars and courtesans alike. One particular stall reportedly sold 72 varieties of noodles, a culinary diversity unmatched anywhere until modern times. Hangzhou's downfall came not from lack of ingenuity, but from forces beyond its control. When Mongol armies breached its walls in 1276, they found a city already partially in ruins, not from war, but from economic inflation caused by overprinting paper money. Yet even Kublai Khan couldn't suppress its spirit. The tea trade continued, the silk workshops adapted, and the bridges remained. Today, when tourists stroll along Hefang Street sampling sticky rice cakes, they walk in the footsteps of a city that proved commerce could be as transformative as conquest and far more enduring. Baghdad's round city wasn't just a marvel of urban design. It was an intellectual supernova, a place where the pursuit of knowledge burned as brightly as the desert sun. Picture the year 762 of the Common Era, when Caliph Al-Mansur's architect sketched concentric circles in the dust along the Tigris, dreaming a metropolis into existence. At its heart stood the Golden Gate Palace, radiating outward through administrative buildings, residential districts, and finally a massive outer wall with 4 gates pointing like compass needles to the empire's corners. This wasn't just city planning, it was cosmic symbolism, a physical manifesto declaring Baghdad the navel of the world. Commerce pulsed through its veins like ink across parchment. Persian silver dirhams, minted with impeccable consistency, flowed from the Dar al-Mal treasury house to markets where merchants from Canton to Cordoba traded under standardized weights. The wharves buzzed with ships unloading Malay spices and Sogdian furs, while camel caravans arrived from Damascus heavy with glassware so clear it rivaled crystal. But the real currency wasn't silver or silk, it was paper. Thanks to captured Chinese artisans after the Battle of Tollers, Baghdad's paper mills transformed rags and flax into sheets that democratized knowledge, slashing the cost of books to a fraction of parchment prices. Enter the House of Wisdom, where scholarship became an industrial process. Translators Christian, Jewish, Zoroastrian worked in teams, turning Greek philosophy and Indian mathematics into Arabic with assembly line efficiency. Hunayn ibn Ishaq didn't just translate Galen's medical texts, he cross-checked versions from Constantinople to Alexandria, creating definitive editions. Meanwhile, Al-Khwarizmi borrowed the Indian numeral 0 and wrote the treatise that would later teach Europe algebra from his title, Al-Jabr. The tools traded here weren't just physical spherical astrolabes from Sind Armenian maps, but conceptual. The scientific method itself took shape in these halls. Yet Baghdad's genius lay in its contradictions. The same city where theologians debated free will in the mosques hosted raucous wine poetry competitions in its gardens. Jewish gem dealers played chess with Zoroastrian astronomers using pieces carved from Ethiopian ivory. Even its downfall carried irony. When Mongol invaders sacked the city in 1258, they destroyed the Grand Library by throwing books into the Tigris, only for the ink of centuries to stain the river black with knowledge. Those waters still whisper a truth. Commerce builds cities, but ideas make them immortal. Golden domes shimmered like inverted bowls of liquid sunlight over Samarkand's Registan Square, a sight so dazzling it stopped 14th century travelers in their tracks. This wasn't just a city, it was Timur the Lame's masterpiece, a brutal conqueror's surprising love letter to beauty, built where the Silk Road split like a river delta toward Persia, India, and China. The Registan's 3 madrasas formed a lecture hall of empires, their facades tiled with sapphire blue arabesques spelling out Quranic verses in cursive brickwork, while inside, mathematicians debated celestial mechanics under ceilings painted like star maps. What made Samarkand extraordinary wasn't just its splendor, it was the alchemy of its markets. In the shadow of Bibi-Konim Mosque, whose mammoth entrance arch reportedly took 900 elephants to construct, Armenian merchants traded Venetian glass for rolls of paper-thin Chinese silk. The paper itself was a marvel. Samarkandi sheets, famed across Islam for their butter-soft texture, copied from techniques learned from Tang dynasty prisoners after the Battle of Tollas. Nearby, Sogdian wine cellars poured amber-hued vintages into silver cups for Turkish horse dealers, the air thick with the scent of saffron from Kashmir and cardamom from the Malabar coast. Timur's genius lay in turning plunder into patronage. After sacking Delhi in 1398, he didn't just haul back gold, he kidnapped weavers, calligraphers, and stonemasons, forcing them to collaborate. Persian floral motifs sprouted alongside Chinese dragons in palace frescoes, while Syrian glassblowers taught their craft to Eiger apprentices. Even the city's layout reflected this fusion. Timur's observatory, where Ulugh Beg calculated the length of a year to within 25 seconds, stood just streets away from a covered bazaar where one could buy everything from Russian sables to Javanese spices. The real heartbeat of Samarkand pulsed in its workshops. Artisans developed kundal, gold leafing so precise it could gild a single hair, while ceramists achieved a turquoise glaze mimicking the exact hue of the desert sky at dawn. Their secret, powdered lapis lazuli from Afghan mines, mixed with ground eggshells for luminosity, a recipe guarded tighter than state secrets. When Spanish ambassador Ruy González de Clavijo visited in 1404, he described carpets woven with metallic threads that caught fire in sunlight, creating the illusion of walking on molten gold. Yet Samarkand's true legacy wasn't in its artifacts, but in its DNA as history's first globalized city. A merchant's ledger from 1422 lists transactions in 12 scripts from Hebrew to Mongol vertical script. The Ulugh Beg madrasa's curriculum blended Aristotle with Hindu astronomy, while the city's kitchens served noodles and samosas side by side. Even decline couldn't erase this spirit. When European ships later bypassed the Silk Road, Samarkand's bazaars adapted, selling Siberian furs to Russians instead of Chinese silks to Venetians. Today, as restoration teams painstakingly replace missing tiles on the Registan's facades, they aren't just repairing a monument, they're reassembling a mosaic of human connection, one cobalt shard at a time. The morning mist rising from Lake Texcoco carried the scent of roasted maize and chili peppers, mingling with the distant cries of caged eagles, a signal that the merchants of Tenochtitlan were opening their stalls. This wasn't just a marketplace, it was a floating wonder, a city within a city where canoes piled high with avocados, jade, and feathered headdresses glided along canals like movable storefronts. Picture the scene. Farmers from the Chinampas artificial islands coaxed from the lake's shallow bed polishing tomatoes the size of fists, while potters from Colula stacked pyramid-shaped clay vessels painted with gods and glyphs. At the center of it all stood the Pochteca, the Aztec merchant guilds who operated as part traders, part spies, their networks stretching from the turquoise mines of New Mexico to the rubber forests of the Maya lowlands. Currency here wasn't stamped with kings' faces, it grew on trees. Cocoa beans, small enough to count by the thousands yet valuable enough to buy a canoe when stuffed into cotton sacks, served as the lifeblood of exchange. A turkey might cost 100 beans, a slave 30,000, but the real economic shockwave came in the form of quatchtli, blankets woven from megi fibers, standardized in size and quality, some so finely made they could hold water. These weren't just commodities, they were proto-banknotes with the palace regulating their production to prevent inflation, a monetary policy centuries ahead of its time. Tribute transformed Tenochtitlan into a kaleidoscope of Mesoamerican wealth. Every 80 days, porters trudged across the great causeways bearing the spoils of empire. Jaguar pelts from the Gulf Coast, amber from Chiapas, even live quetzals whose iridescent feathers would adorn the emperor's headdress. The city's warehouses bulged with these treasures, meticulously recorded by scribes using pictograms that tracked everything from the number of copper bells to the exact shade of cochineal dye. Yet the most astonishing sight might have been the zoo, a menagerie where ocelots and scarlet macaws from conquered territories served as living proof of Aztec dominance. What truly set Tenochtitlan apart was its hydraulic mastery. Engineers carved canals wide enough for 10 canoes abreast, dredged regularly to prevent silt buildup. Aqueducts of baked clay carried fresh water from springs at Chapultepec, while dikes held back brackish floodwaters during storms. This wasn't just infrastructure, it was a declaration. When Spanish chronicler Bernal Díaz del Castillo first saw the city in 1519, he mistook it for a dream, towering pyramids reflected in the lake's mirror surface, causeways thronged with pilgrims, and the market at Tlatelolco so vast its hum could be heard miles away. Then came the reckoning. The same waterways that nourished Tenochtitlan became its Achilles' heel when Cortés' allies built brigantines to blockade the city. Starvation followed siege, and the lake that once teemed with canoes became a graveyard of toppled temples. Yet walk the streets of modern Mexico City after a heavy rain, and you might glimpse patches of the original lakebed seeping through concrete, a reminder that beneath the modern metropolis still beats the heart of a place where trade wasn't just transaction but theology. For the Aztecs, commerce was sacred. Every market stall stood under the gaze of Yaxcatecutli, the hook-nosed god of merchants whose staff guided travelers safely home. In that convergence of faith and economics lay Tenochtitlan's true genius, a vision of trade as both earthly necessity and cosmic covenant. Beneath the perfume of Zanzibar's clove plantations lingered a darker scent: sweat, iron, and the salt of human suffering. The island's very soil seemed to pulse with contradictions, fields of fragrant spice trees shading the crumbling ruins of slave chambers where rusted chains still bite into stone. This wasn't just a tropical paradise, it was the engine room of the Indian Ocean's most brutal economy, where Omani sultans grew fat on a trifecta of cloves, ivory, and flesh. Picture the scene: Arab dhows bobbing in Stone Town's harbor, their holds packed with tusks from the African interior, while below deck, captives bound for Persian Gulf plantations crouched in their own filth. The same winds that filled sails with the spice trade's promise also carried the wails of those sold at the infamous Mkanazini auction block, where buyers pinched muscles and pried open teeth like livestock. What made Zanzibar's horror so systematic was its chilling efficiency. The island wasn't merely a slave market, it was a supply chain hub. Tipu Tip, the most notorious trader of all, didn't just capture people, he industrialized the process, carving a private empire stretching from the coast to the Congo. His agents Swahili, Nyamwezi, and Arab-used American made rifles to raid villages, then forced survivors to haul ivory to the coast, where both commodities were traded for cloth and guns. The accounting was meticulous. One tusk equaled one human life, with ledgers noting deaths from dysentery or lion attacks as mere shrinkage. Even the island's architecture bore witness. The House of Wonders, the Sultan's glittering palace, was built with mortar mixed from crushed coral and the ashes of burned shackles. Yet Zanzibar's story isn't monolithic. Beneath the brutality thrived a cultural alchemy. Freed slaves, Arab merchants, and Indian moneylenders forged Swahili, a language as fluid as the tides, blending Bantu roots with Arabic script. In the narrow alleys of Stone Town, women in kangas haggled over Gujarati silks while scribes penned contracts in ornate script. The island's cuisine became its conscience. Coconut curries carried the memory of Southeast Asian laborers, while spiced pilau rice whispered of Persian traders who'd stayed. Even the cloves themselves, originally smuggled from Mauritius by a French botanist, became symbols of resilience. their purple buds blooming defiantly from the blood-soaked soil. The ghosts linger in the details. At the Anglican cathedral, the altar stands where the whipping post once did, its stained glass depicting Christ in chains. The underground chambers of the old slave market now house souvenir stalls, but the damp walls still bear fingernail scratches. And every August, when the monsoon winds shift, the scent of drying cloves wraps the island like a shroud, sweet, pungent, and impossible to ignore. Zanzibar's lesson is as bitter as its spices. Progress and pain grow from the same root, and the routes that carried civilization's luxuries also trafficked its darkest sins. To walk these streets isn't just to explore history, it's to tread the knife's edge between beauty and brutality, where every breeze carries both the perfume of clothes and the echoes of chains. Damascus wears its age like a crown, layers of civilization stacked one atop another, each leaving their mark on the city's sinewy streets. Step into the Umayyad Mosque's courtyard, and your feet press against stones that have borne the weight of Roman sandals, Crusader boots, and the bare soles of countless pilgrims. This isn't just the world's oldest continuously inhabited city. It's a living parchment where every alleyway whispers stories in Aramaic, Arabic, and the metallic clang of bladesmiths hammering Damascene steel into legend. The secret to Damascus' endurance lies in its veins, not just the Barada River's life-giving waters, but the trade routes that converged here like arteries. Picture the caravans, Bedouin guides leading camels laden with frankincense from Oman, their hides dusty from the desert, while Phoenician merchants unrolled bolts of Tyrian purple for Syrian nobles. The city's greatest alchemy, though, happened in its forges. Craftsmen heated Indian wood steel in clay furnaces, folding and reforging it until the metal rippled like water, a technique lost to time until modern metallurgists still struggle to replicate it. A single sword could sell for its weight in gold, its edge capable of slicing through a silk scarf dropped onto its blade, yet tough enough to shatter lesser weapons. But Damascus was more than steel and silk. Its labyrinthine Souk al-Hamadiyya has been a marketplace for over 2,000 years, its vaulted ceilings perforated with sunlight that dances over pyramids of Aleppo soap and sacks of sumac. Here, generations of merchants perfected the art of the deal, haggling over Persian carpets with one hand while sipping cardamom-laced coffee with the other. The city's culinary legacy echoes this exchange. Kibbeh, a dish of minced lamb and bulgur, traveled west to become Spain's albondigas, while its apricot orchards gifted the world the first jam, preserved in sunlight-thickened grape molasses. Damascus' real genius was absorption. When Rome conquered it, the city kept its temples alongside new colonnades. Under Islamic rule, the Church of John the Baptist became a mosque without demolishment, its altar transformed into a mihrab, Christian mosaics still glittering beside Quranic calligraphy. Even the Mongols, who burned the city in 1400, couldn't erase its spirit. Within decades, the bazaars buzzed again, their stalls now selling Venetian glass alongside camel saddles stitched with golden thread. Today, as dawn washes the minarets in honeyed light, the scent of freshly baked cobs mingles with the tang of grinding metal. Somewhere in the old city, a blacksmith's hammer strikes steel, one more link in an unbroken chain stretching back to the Bronze Age. Damascus doesn't just survive, it remembers, reminding us that the greatest cities aren't built on conquest, but on the quiet persistence of everyday hands, the weavers, smiths, and bakers who kept the world turning while empires rose and fell around them. Brick by blood-red brick, Lübeck rose from the Baltic marshes like a merchant's fortress, its skyline bristling with stepped gables and steeples, each building a ledger of calculated profit. This wasn't just a city, it was the beating heart of the Hanseatic League, a medieval trade syndicate so powerful it made kings beg for loans and bishops tremble at embargoes. Picture the scene. Frostbitten sailors unloading barrels of Novgorod's finest beeswax onto creaking docks, while inside the Skiffergesellschaft tavern, shipmasters sealed deals over mugs of spiced beer, their chairs carved with nautical knots to honor drowned comrades. The Hansa's genius was its cold-blooded pragmatism. Unlike empires built on conquest, this was a corporation masquerading as a civilization. Lübeck's lawmakers, wealthy burghers in fur-trimmed robes, crafted maritime codes so precise they dictated how many anchors a cog must carry and the exact width of herring barrels. Their contours, fortified trading posts from London to Bergen, operated like offshore tax havens, offering German merchants extraterritorial rights while squeezing local economies dry. In Bruges, the Hanseatic Quarter had its own jail, scales, and even a private canal, a sovereign state within a city. What flowed through these networks wasn't just goods but cultural shockwaves. Lübeck's red brick Gothic style, born from a lack of local stone, became the Hanseatic brand, replicated from Tallinn to Gdansk. The city's St. Mary's Church, with its towering nave, doubled as a bond market where traders whispered bets on Baltic grain harvests. Even the humble salted herring became currency, cured in Scandinavian bays and traded by the 1,000 barrel for Russian furs or Flemish cloth. But Lübeck's real power lay in collective punishment. When Norway's king dared tax Hanseatic ships, the League simply shut down all trade for 7 years, starving the kingdom into submission. Their ledgers recorded debts in Lübeck marks, a fictional currency adjusted to maximize profit, while their spies infiltrated rival ports to sabotage competitors. The city's wealth built not just grand homes but an early form of venture capitalism, funding mining operations in Sweden and even backing exploratory voyages to Iceland. Yet the tides turned when new trade routes bypassed the Baltic. The final insult came in 1669, when a single Dutch merchant fleet carried more cargo than the entire Hanseatic League that year. Today, Lübeck's Holstentor Gate still stands, its rounded towers emblazoned with the League's motto, Concordia Domi Forest Pax, harmony at home, peace abroad. A charming lie, of course. This was a machine built on ruthless efficiency, proving that commerce, not crowns, could rewrite the maps of influence. The salt-crusted timbers of its wrecked cogs now whisper a truth. In the right hands, a ledger can be deadlier than a sword. The first thing sailors noticed as they approached Mogadishu wasn't the skyline, it was the scent. A heady blend of frankincense smoke from Arab dhows, the earthy musk of African ivory being unloaded, and the briny tang of turtle soup simmering in copper pots along the shore. This wasn't just another Swahili port. It was the continent's grand bazaar, where Bantu fishermen bartered with Persian jewelers over strands of Maldivian cowrie shells, while Gujarati ship captains compared notes with Somali caravan masters fresh from the interior's goldfields. Mogadishu's golden age in the 13th century birthed an architectural love letter to cultural fusion. Coral ragstone palaces rose along the waterfront, their facades carved with geometric patterns echoing both Quranic verses and traditional Somali clan motifs. Inside their vaulted chambers, Chinese porcelain from the Ming dynasty, some pieces custom ordered with Arabic inscriptions, shared shelf space with bronze astrolabes from Damascus and manuscripts bound in giraffe hide. The city's Friday Mosque, built with ocean-smooth limestone blocks, featured a minaret that doubled as a lighthouse, its lantern guiding ships bearing Malagasy cinnamon and Sri Lankan sapphires into the safety of the harbor. What set Mogadishu apart was its role as the indispensable middleman. Gold from Great Zimbabwe's hinterlands passed through its markets en route to Cairo's mint houses, while Arabian horses bred for Indian sultans were exercised on beaches patrolled by Somali guards wielding crescent-shaped daggers. The city's true currency, though, was information. Merchant houses maintained scribes who recorded monsoon patterns and political unrest from Aden to Malacca in coded ledgers, early risk assessment for caravan routes. A single rumor of a coup in Calicut could send Mogadishu's traders scrambling to reroute pepper shipments before competitors caught wind. The culinary scene revealed this crossroads best. Street vendors served Anjero spongy pancakes derived from Indian dosas topped with Somali-style stewed goat, while tea houses infused Yemeni coffee leaves with cardamom from the nearby Benadir coast. Even the city's signature textile, the durak, wove together Chinese silk threads with Egyptian cotton into lightweight fabrics dyed vibrant indigo using techniques borrowed from Berber weavers. Yet Mogadishu's decline held an ironic twist. When Portuguese explorer Vasco da Gama stopped here in 1499, he marveled at the wealth but failed to grasp its fragility. The very trade networks that enriched the city would later bypass it as European ships sailed directly to India. Today, the ruins of merchant villas stand as silent witnesses to a time when this was the place where continents converged not through conquest, but through the quiet calculus of supply and demand. The lesson lingers in the coral walls still resisting monsoons. Prosperity built on exchange outlasts even the mightiest empires. Ayutthaya's canals glittered like molten gold at sunset, their waters choked with sampans ferrying Persian carpets, Japanese lacquerware, and sacks of Siamese rice to floating markets where deals were sealed with a nod and a betel-stained smile. This wasn't just Siam's capital, it was the Venice of the East, a city so cosmopolitan that Dutch traders reported hearing 17 languages before breakfast. At its peak in the 17th century, 40 separate merchant enclaves fanned out from the royal palace like spokes on a wheel. Each community granted its own quarter to worship and trade as they pleased. Walk the streets near the Portuguese settlement, and you'd pass Chinese apothecaries grinding ginseng beside Persian goldsmiths melting down pagan rubies, while Tamil textile merchants unrolled bolts of Coromandel cotton under the watchful eyes of Japanese ronin-turned bodyguards. The lifeblood of Ayutthaya's economy pulsed through its elephant corrals, where handlers bred and trained the finest war pachyderms in Asia. A single well-trained tusker could fetch the equivalent of a nobleman's ransom from Mughal buyers, their value measured not just in military might but in ceremonial prestige. Dutch East India Company records detail how Siamese elephants were shipped to Surat with custom-made bamboo cranes, their feet wrapped in coconut fiber padding to prevent slips on deck. But the real marvel was Ayutthaya's sapphire trade. Mines in Chanthaburi produced stones of such deep cornflower blue that Persian jewelers claimed they rivaled the heavens, a reputation so potent that Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan allegedly sent agents to outbid all competitors for a pair to adorn Peacock Throne. Teak was the city's silent powerhouse. Unlike other Southeast Asian ports that relied on monsoon-driven trade seasons, Ayutthaya's shipyards operated year-round, their docks stacked with the fragrant golden timber. Portuguese shipwrights paid premiums for mature trunks straight-grained and resistant to shipworm to build carracks capable of surviving the Cape of Good Hope's tempests. The wood's value birthed an entire ecosystem. Karen hill tribes developed specialized logging techniques using trained elephants, while Mon craftsmen perfected a method of steaming planks into graceful curves for royal barges. What truly set Ayutthaya apart was its hydraulic genius. A labyrinth of canals connected the Chao Phraya River to hidden warehouses where monsoon floods automatically regulated water levels, preventing both rot and fire. Chinese chroniclers marveled at the water gates, submerged bamboo grids that filtered debris while allowing boats to pass, an innovation later copied in Batavia and Manila. Even the city's downfall in 1767 carried irony. Burmese invaders breached the walls not through sheer force, but by bribing a Mon fishing community to reveal the secret canal that fed the royal granaries. Today, as lotus flowers bloom amidst the ruins of Wat Chewatthanaram's crumbling prangs, their roots tangling with shards of Ming porcelain and Portuguese cannonballs, the lesson endures. Fluidity was Ayutthaya's strength and ultimately its vulnerability. The same waterways that made it a global crossroads became the arteries of its demise. Bruges slept soundly behind its fortified walls until the bells of the belfry shattered the dawn, signaling the start of another day where fortunes were made and lost before noon. This wasn't just a Flemish town. It was the Wall Street of the Middle Ages, where the very concept of modern finance took shape between sips of hopped beer and the rhythmic clatter of looms weaving English wool into Flemish gold. Picture the scene: cobbled squares jammed with Italian bankers in fur-lined cloaks haggling over promissory notes, while Hanseatic merchants from Lubeck inspected sacks of wool like alchemists judging raw ore. The air reeked of damp wool, candle wax, and the metallic tang of freshly minted gros tournois coins, each one a tiny revolution in trust-based commerce. What set Bruges apart wasn't just its labyrinth of canals. Though these watery highways let barges unload Yorkshire fleeces directly into dyers' vats, but its radical innovations in risk management. The Bourse, a modest square near the Berg, became the world's first proper stock exchange when traders began swapping not just goods, but shares in future cargo shipments. A Florentine merchant might buy a tenth of a Portuguese spice fleet before its sails even rounded Gibraltar, while a local draper sold futures contracts on next season's undyed cloth. These deals were sealed with handshakes and God as witness, but woe to anyone who reneged. The city's Waterhall, a sprawling riverside warehouse, kept meticulous ledgers enforced by burghers who could ban defaulters from trade for life. The real engine of Bruges' wealth pulsed through the wool halls. Here, English raw wool, prized for its long, silky fibers, was graded with a precision that would make modern commodities traders blush. Clerks used sealed samples called tickets to guarantee quality, while brokers traded debt bonds backed by future fleece shipments. When the 100 Years' War disrupted supply chains, Bruges simply pivoted. Its financiers created letters of credit negotiable across Europe, effectively inventing international banking. Even the humble barge ticket became a speculative instrument, with prices fluctuating based on rumors of pirate attacks or canal freezes. Yet Bruges' most lasting legacy was invisible: trust. The city's hostelers, part innkeeper, part venture capitalist, vouched for foreign traders, while the Hanseatic contour maintained its own courts to settle disputes. This ecosystem birthed financial instruments still used today. Double-entry bookkeeping migrated from Italian counting houses to Bruges ledgers, while insurance contracts scribbled on parchment evolved into Lloyd's of London's policies. The city's obsession with record-keeping birthed something unexpected: a portrait of medieval commerce so detailed we know the exact price Ghent weavers paid for Scottish wool in 1382, or how much a Venetian glassblower owed his Antwerp supplier. Then came the reckoning. The Zwin River silted up, stranding Bruges' lifeblood as Antwerp's deeper ports stole its trade. But walk the marked square today, past chocolate shops selling gold-foiled pralines, and you'll tread the same stones where futures trading was born. The Belfry's carillon still marks the hours, though now it chimes for tourists instead of wool brokers. Bruges' lesson endures in every stock ticker and wire transfer. Commerce thrives not on goods alone, but on the fragile, precious belief that a promise today will hold value tomorrow. Hoy and Thurbon River carries more than water. It flows with centuries of whispered haggling, the echoes of silk merchants and porcelain traders who turned this sleepy Vietnamese estuary into a kaleidoscope of commerce. By the 16th century, this wasn't just a port. It was a chameleon city morphing to welcome Japanese samurai turned merchants, Chinese tea magnates, and Dutch East India Company agents, each leaving their mark in timber and tile. Walk its lantern-lit streets today and you'll tread a living palimpsest, a Japanese bridge with a Taoist temple grafted to its side, Chinese guild halls painted in oxblood lacquer, and mustard yellow colonial facades hinting at European ambitions. The secret to Hoi and allure wasn't just its location, it was its flexibility. When Japan's Tokugawa shogunate slammed its doors to foreign trade in the 17th century, Japanese settlers here simply stayed, their arched roofs and exposed beamwork blending seamlessly into the Vietnamese streetscape. Nearby, the Cantonese assembly hall buzzed with deals brokered over porcelain from Jingdezhen. its kilns firing celadon glazed dishes exclusively for export. Dutch records from 1635 describe warehouses stacked with pyramid-shaped tea bricks, each wrapped in mulberry paper and stamped with red seals, a precursor to modern branding. Silk spun Hoi and fortunes into gold. Local weavers mastered a technique so refined that threads shimmered like liquid metal, dyed using sappanwood from Laos and indigo from the Mekong Delta. A single bolt could fetch triple its weight in silver from Kyoto aristocrats, while Dutch traders shipped lengths to Batavia as bribes for spice sultans. The real magic happened in Hoi and back alleys, where tailor shops still operate as living museums, measuring clients with bamboo rulers and cutting fabric using 17th-century patterns passed down through generations. Ceramics tell a darker tale. Dive teams near the river mouth still surface shards of fish plates and kendi-spouted jars, their cobalt blues faded by centuries underwater. These weren't just broken wares, they were insurance scams. Merchants deliberately sank shipments to inflate losses, collecting payouts from Hoi and bustling maritime insurance guilds before secretly salvaging the cargo at night. The practice grew so rampant that the Nguyen lords decreed all sunken ceramics must bear the buyer's chop mark, etched deep enough to survive saltwater corrosion. What truly sets Hoi An apart is its unfinished business. Unlike frozen in-time museum towns, this is a place where history still bargains. At the central market, elderly women weigh dried squid on brass scales beside stacks of turmeric root, just as their ancestors weighed peppercorns for Portuguese buyers. The Japanese bridge, now a symbol of cultural fusion, originally served a pragmatic purpose, its northern half built by Japanese traders to reach Chinese warehouses, its southern span funded by Vietnamese officials eager to tax both. Even the famous lanterns, now romanticized as tourist attractions, began as practical navigation aids for silk-laden sampans gliding home at dusk. The river still murmurs with ghosts of deals struck and fortunes lost. When monsoon rains swell the Thurbon, they occasionally uncover Ming Dynasty coins in the silt tiny copper, reminders that Hoi An's real wealth was never in its silk or ceramics, but in its ability to become whatever the world needed it to be. Today, as tailors' scissors snip through emerald brocade and kilns fire replicas of ancient bowls, the city whispers a truth older than its bridges. Commerce builds cities, but adaptation keeps them alive. Off the coast of Tanzania, where the Indian Ocean melts into turquoise shallows, lie the crumbling coral ruins of Kilwa, a city so wealthy its sultans allegedly paved streets with gold dust. This wasn't just another Swahili port, it was the toll booth of the medieval world, perched strategically between the goldfields of Great Zimbabwe and the insatiable markets of Cairo and Baghdad. Picture the scene: Arab dhows bobbing in the harbor, their holds stuffed with raw ivory and chests of golden dust weighed to the grain, while Persian glassmakers bartered beads so coveted they became currency in inland kingdoms. Kilwa's power stemmed from a ruthless monopoly. Unlike other ports that simply facilitated trade, the city's rulers, the Shirazi dynasty, controlled the entire southern gold route. They built massive stone warehouses on the mainland coast where caravans from Zimbabwe's interior were forced to unload their precious cargo. No gold could reach the coast without passing through Kilwa's customs house, where officials collected a staggering 1/3 of its value in taxes. A single surviving ledger from the 13th century lists a year's haul at over 200,000 mithkals, enough gold to buy an entire fleet of warships. The city's architecture screamed its prosperity. The great mosque's domed roof, supported by meticulously aligned coral columns, was the largest in sub-Saharan Africa at the time. Nearby, the Husuni Kubwa Palace sprawled with over 100 rooms, including a sunken octagonal pool where guests washed their feet in rosewater before banquets. But the real engineering marvel lay beneath the waves. Kilwa's harbor was dredged to accommodate deep draft vessels, while coral block breakwaters shielded ships from monsoons. an innovation that turned the island into a year-round trading hub when other ports shuttered during storm season. Gold wasn't Kilwa's only secret. Excavations have uncovered Ming Dynasty porcelain shards with custom cobalt blue patterns designed for Swahili tastes, proof of direct trade with China. Even more telling are the fragments of green-glazed pottery from Persia, their interiors scarred with abrasions. Archaeologists realized these were used to crush rock crystal into powder, an essential ingredient for the glassmaking that turned Kilwa into a bead production powerhouse. These tiny glass orbs, traded deep into Africa, became the pennies of the continent's medieval economy. Then came the twist of fate. In 1505, Portuguese cannons shattered Kilwa's walls, not for its gold but for its strategic position. Vasco da Gama's men marveled at the city's wealth but failed to grasp the true source of its power, the trust networks painstakingly built over centuries. Without the Shirazi merchants who'd mastered the art of cross-cultural negotiation, the gold routes withered. Within decades, the palace's gilded ceilings collapsed under the weight of neglect, and the harbor silted up with the ghosts of 1,000 unanswered deals. Today, Kilwa's ruins whisper a lesson in leverage. The sultans understood that true wealth lies not in possessing treasure, but in controlling its flow. As mangrove roots slowly reclaim the coral walls, their tendrils curl around a timeless truth. Empires rise and fall, but the choke points of commerce endure, waiting for the next shrewd operator to rediscover them. Antioch's streets pulsed with the whispers of 100 languages, a symphony of Aramaic, Greek, and Persian echoing through colonnades where Roman magistrates rubbed shoulders with Syrian silk merchants. This wasn't just another crossroads, it was the Silk Road's grand finale, where caravans that had trekked from Chang'an finally unloaded their treasures onto Mediterranean ships. Picture the docks at Seleucia Pieria, Antioch's artificial harbor. Bales of Chinese silk stamped with imperial seals piled beside jars of Iranian saffron, while Nabatean traders from Petra haggled over the price of Indian pepper under the watchful eyes of Roman tax collectors. The city's very layout told the story of its hybrid soul, main avenues laid out in perfect Roman grids, yet lined with Persian-inspired vaulted bazaars where the scent of roasting pistachios mingled with the earthy aroma of dyed wool. What set Antioch apart wasn't just its goods, but its gods, or rather, the way they coexisted. The grottos of Mount Silpius housed shrines to Zeus and Mithras side by side, while Syrian astrologers cast horoscopes for wealthy Roman matrons using Babylonian star charts. This spiritual marketplace became fertile ground for a radical new faith. When followers of Jesus first preached here, they didn't hide in catacombs, they argued philosophy in the agora, earning Antioch the title Cradle of Christianity. The term Christian itself was coined within these walls, initially as a sneer by locals amused by this sect's fervor before it became a badge of pride. The city's true genius lay in its textile alchemy. Syrian weavers took Chinese silk threads and overdyed them with Tyrian purple, creating fabrics so luxurious they made Roman senators swoon. Meanwhile, glassblowers along the Orontes River fused Egyptian techniques with Persian designs, producing mosaic glass bowls that glittered like captured sunlight. Even Antioch's infamous chariot races reflected its mercantile soul. The racing factions, blues, greens, reds, and whites, doubled as trade guilds, their loyalty determining everything from spice prices to political appointments. Then came the earthquakes, not just one, but a series of ruinous tremors in the 6th century that shattered aqueducts and toppled temples. Yet Antioch's demise wasn't merely geological. When Persian then Arab armies conquered the city, they bypassed its crippled harbor for Damascus' rising markets. The final blow came subtly. Silt from Diphneh's gardens gradually choked the Orontes River, stranding Antioch inland as the sea retreated. Today, few tourists linger among the scattered columns and Byzantine mosaics, but the city's legacy persists in every Sunday sermon worldwide, proof that ideas like silk often travel farthest when carried by commerce. Deep in the coastal forests of Kenya, where tangled roots weave through crumbling walls, the ruins of Jade whisper secrets of a vanished world. This wasn't just a Swahili settlement, it was a hidden nexus of global trade, where Ming Dynasty porcelain fragments lie scattered beside Persian glass beads, all buried under centuries of soil and strangler figs. Walk its silent streets today, and you'll tread over artifacts that map an astonishing network. Chinese celadon bowls stacked in what was once a merchant's house, Indian cowrie shells drilled for threading onto wealth belts, even shards of Egyptian rock crystal transformed into delicate perfume bottles. Jade's genius lay in its subtle dominance. Unlike Kilwa's showy palaces or Zanzibar's bustling ports, this city thrived as a discreet middleman nestled inland from the pirate-haunted coast. Archaeologists found no defensive walls, just clever positioning. Its founders chose a spot where freshwater springs met hidden trails leading to the ivory-rich Tsavo wilderness, creating a perfect backchannel for luxury goods. Arab dhows would anchor at nearby Watamu, their captains trusting Jade's merchants to handle the final overland leg to Somali and Omani buyers. The city's wealth built not on force but on discretion and diplomacy. The real smoking gun, a single broken compass found near the Great Mosque's ruins. This wasn't some crude lodestone, it was a sophisticated dry-card Chinese design, its ivory dial etched with constellations only visible north of the equator. How did it get here? Most likely via Zheng He's legendary treasure fleets, which reached East Africa in the 15th century. Ming records mention exchanges with Western barbarians, but Jade's excavations prove these weren't mere ceremonial gifts. Porcelain fragments bear kiln marks from Jingdezhen workshops specializing in export ware, their thin walls and blue and white peony patterns identical to those found in Borneo and Bahrain. Yet Jade's most enduring mystery isn't its global connections, it's why such a thriving city was abandoned. The ruins show no signs of violence, just orderly departures, cooking pots left on hearths, jewelry tucked into wall niches. Some scholars blame shifting trade routes as Portuguese caravels bypassed Swahili middlemen. Others point to ecological clues. A layer of saltwater sediment in the wells suggests a tsunami or rising water tables. But perhaps the most haunting theory comes from local Giriyama elders who speak of a time when the trees grew too loud. Their oral histories describe Jade's residents fleeing not invaders or famine, but a creeping dread that the forest itself had turned against them. Today, as golden light filters through the canopy onto coral rag houses, the city's true legacy emerges. Those Ming bowls and Persian mirrors weren't just imports. They were the DNA of a society that mastered cultural alchemy. In the palace ruins, archaeologists found a prayer room facing Mecca, its mihrab framed by carved wooden panels depicting leopards and coconut palms, an unmistakable blend of Islamic and Bantu traditions. Even the toilets astonish, advanced flush systems using rainwater channels centuries ahead of European sanitation. Jade's final lesson lingers in the artifacts left behind. A child's toy, a tiny wooden giraffe with movable legs, lies half buried near a workshop where artisans once shaped obsidian into mirrors. It's a poignant reminder that even at the crossroads of continents, people built not just economies but lives. The city didn't vanish because it failed. It disappeared precisely because it succeeded too well, weaving itself so thoroughly into the fabric of global trade that when those threads unraveled, its purpose faded like ink on water. Now, as vervet monkeys scatter porcelain shards like fallen stars, the forest reclaims what commerce once connected. The Strait of Malacca is a geographic bottleneck so crucial that controlling it meant controlling the pulse of Asian trade, and no city mastered this choke point like Malacca. Picture a harbor where Javanese junks jostled for space alongside Gujarati dhows, while Chinese treasure ships loomed over them all like floating cities. This wasn't just a port, it was a cultural pressure cooker where Malay sultans, Chinese admirals, and Portuguese conquistadors collided. each leaving an indelible mark on the city's soul. What set Malacca apart was its ruthless pragmatism. Founded by a runaway Hindu prince turned Muslim ruler, the city's early survival depended on playing regional powers against each other. When Ming Dynasty Admiral Zheng He's fleet first arrived in 1409, bearing gifts of silk and porcelain, Malacca's rulers saw an opportunity. They swore allegiance to the Chinese emperor not as subjects but as strategic partners, securing protection against Thai invaders while keeping their autonomy. In return, Zheng He used Malacca as his regional base, storing tribute goods in warehouses that became the nucleus of the city's sprawling entrepot trade. The real genius lay in Malacca's legal code, the Undang-Undang Malacca. This wasn't just law, it was a merchant's dream. Pirates caught plundering ships faced impalement, guaranteeing safe passage through the treacherous strait. Standardized weights and measures were enforced by harbor masters who could slice off a hand for cheating. Most revolutionary was the concept of market peace. Any violence in the trading zones nullified all business deals until reparations were paid, turning merchants into self-policing enforcers of order. Then came the spices. Malacca became the funnel through which Sumatran pepper, Javanese cinnamon, and Banda nutmeg flowed north to China and west to Persia. The city's currency system reveals its sophistication. Tin coins stamped with the Sultan's crest circulated alongside Chinese copper cash and Indian gold pagodas, with exchange rates posted daily at the customs house. Arabic loanwords seeped into Malay for accounting terms, while Tamil became the lingua franca of the docks. Everything changed in 1511. Portuguese commander Afonso de Albuquerque didn't just conquer Malacca, he studied it. Recognizing that its wealth came from systems, not just location, he preserved the existing trade networks while inserting European elements. The Formosa fortress rose using stones looted from Muslim tombs, its cannons trained not on the harbor but inland, a clear message that the Portuguese feared local rebellion more than foreign fleets. They kept the spice auctions but added Catholic convents, creating a bizarre hybrid where Javanese traders could haggle over cloves in the morning and hear Latin vespers by dusk. Malacca's true legacy is written in its cuisine. Nyonya dishes like the tangy Assam laksa or the coconut-rich rendang blend Chinese wok techniques with Malay spices, while Portuguese descendants still bake suji cakes laced with European almonds. Walk Jonker Street today and the shophouses whisper this history. Chinese calligraphy brushes past Dutch colonial shutters, while Hindu temple bells mingle with the musician's call. The city proved that trade isn't just about controlling waterways, it's about the willingness to absorb every influence that washes ashore, turning conquest into collaboration. Beneath the spreading branches of Sri Mahabodh, high a sacred fig tree grown from a cutting of the very tree under which Buddha attained enlightenment. Anuradhapora's monks once mixed medicines in stone bowls while traders weighed cinnamon bark on bronze scales. This wasn't just Sri Lanka's ancient capital, it was a visionary city where spirituality and commerce intertwined with startling sophistication. For over a millennium, its dagobas, massive domed stupas clad in burnished copper, gleamed like beacons across the Indian Ocean, drawing pilgrims and merchants from as far as Rome and Canton. What they found was more than a holy city. It was a meticulously engineered hub where the scent of sacred lotus blossoms mingled with the tang of cinnamon rafts floating down the Malvatu Oya River. Anuradhapora's economy pulsed with two sacred commodities, gems and cinnamon. Its mines yielded rubies so vividly crimson they were called pigeon's blood by Persian traders, while sapphires from nearby Ratnapura, literally city of gems, found their way into the crowns of Khmer kings and Byzantine empresses. But the real marvel was cinnamon. The city held a near monopoly on true Ceylon cinnamon. Its quills rolled from the soft inner bark of trees guarded like state secrets. Greek geographer Strabo reported that Arab middlemen spun wild tales of cinnamon birds nesting in perilous cliffs to disguise its Sri Lankan origin. allowing Anuradhapuра's merchants to command prices so extravagant that a single shipload could finance the construction of a new monastery. Health was as much a priority as wealth. The ruins of Mohenjo-Daro Hospital, established in the 4th century before the Common Era, reveal a healthcare system startlingly ahead of its time. Excavated medical tools include scalpels with detachable blades, bone setters braces, and even specialized probes for cataract surgery, centuries before such procedures were documented elsewhere. Patient wards were segregated by ailment, with separate wings for contagious diseases and mental health, while herb gardens supplied remedies from neem leaves to sandalwood paste. The system's piece de resistance, a network of filtered water tanks supplying antiseptic rinses, their designs later copied by Gupta-era Indian physicians. The city's urban planning bordered on divine precision. A dual-pipe sewer system rivaling Rome's ran beneath brick-paved streets, while moonstone-adorned staircases at royal palaces served as early braille-like guides for barefoot monks moving in meditation. Reservoirs like the colossal Tissawe were still functioning after 2,300 years demonstrated hydrological mastery, their sluice gates regulating water for both ritual baths and rice terraces. Even Anuradhapura's famed spirit warehouses blended commerce with cosmology. Merchants stored cinnamon and gemstones in vaults beneath temples, believing sacred energy would enhance their value. When Chinese Buddhist pilgrim Faxian visited in the 5th century, he described a metropolis where hospital chaplains doubled as grief counselors and gem cutters observed fasting days alongside monks. This harmony of material and spiritual wealth wasn't accidental, it was policy. Kings like Devanampiya Tissa decreed that a portion of every gem sale fund free clinics, while cinnamon exports subsidized scripture copying workshops. The result was a civilization where a physician's salary might be paid in peppercorns, and a ruby's sale could endow a library of palm leaf manuscripts. Today, as archaeologists uncover surgical tools near the Abhayagiri monastery's lecture halls, a profound truth emerges. Anuradhapura's greatness didn't stem from conquest or extraction, but from seeing trade and healing as two strands of the same sacred thread. The same hands that polished sapphires for foreign monarchs ground herbs for the common sick, proving that a city's worth isn't measured in treasures hoarded, but in value shared. The echoes linger in Sri Lanka's modern spice markets, where cinnamon is still graded using ancient methods, and in hospital courtyards where neem trees grow, living reminders that commerce, when wisely stewarded, can be its own form of prayer. At the heart of the Yucatan's dense jungle, where limestone meets sky in towering pyramids, Chichen Itza wasn't just a city. It was a sacred stock exchange where jade beads clinked like divine currency and salt routes stretched like arteries to the sea. Imagine the Cenote Sagrado, a gaping sinkhole swallowing sunlight into turquoise depths, where gold ornaments and human whispers alike disappeared beneath the water, not just as sacrifices, but as transactional offerings to maintain cosmic commerce. This was no isolated ceremonial site. Chichen Itza's power flowed from two improbable sources: sweltering salt pans along the northern coast and misty highland jade mines over 600 miles south in modern-day Guatemala. The genius lay in controlling both ends of this invisible rope. Maya merchants known as Palam organized caravans of human porters who trekked the Sakbiab-raised limestone causeways with packs of salt so pure it served as the Yucatan's white gold. Meanwhile, jade, more valuable than life itself in Maya cosmology, was hauled northward along these same roads, transformed by Itza artisans into deity masks and ear flares that adorned kings from Tikal to Paling. The cenote wasn't merely spiritual, it was an economic engine. Spanish Bishop Diego de Landa's 16th century accounts describe throwings of jewelry, figurines, and even copper axes into its depths, objects dredged up in modern times bearing marks from as far away as Costa Rica and central Mexico. This wasn't random tribute. Like a divine customs house, the cenote ritualized wealth redistribution, with foreign goods symbolically returned to the gods while physically concentrating treasures under its control. Divers have recovered over 30,000 artifacts from its murky bottom, including gold discs chemically traced to Colombian mines, proof of trade networks spanning continents before Europe even dreamed of the New World. What truly set Chichen Itza apart was its hydrological mastery in a land with no rivers. The city's astronomers-engineers aligned the Temple of Kukulkan to cast serpentine shadows during equinoxes, but their real innovation lay underground. By mapping hundreds of cenotes like a subterranean subway system, they created a fail-safe water network that doubled as trade infrastructure. During droughts that crippled rival cities, Chichen Itza's reservoirs kept commerce flowing. Salt traders paid in water rights as much as in jade. The ball court tells the final piece of this story. Its towering walls don't just depict victorious players. They show them adorned with jade belts holding decapitated heads, some carved from obsidian imported from central Mexico. Even the deadly sport was economic theater. Captives from rival cities likely played for their lives, with victories cementing Itza trade alliances. The acoustics here still astonish. A whisper at one end carries clearly to the other, a design feature that may have allowed merchants to negotiate without intermediaries. When Spanish chroniclers arrived, they misunderstood the abandoned city as solely a place of terror. But walk the Great North Platform at dawn, where shadows reveal worn grooves from countless market stalls, and you'll sense the truth. Chichen Itza thrived not through brutality alone, but by intertwining commerce with the cosmos, proving that even the gods appreciate a well-struck deal. Gao rose from the banks of the Niger like a mirage of wealth, its docks bristling with canoes stacked high with gold dust so pure it could blind a man at noon. This wasn't just another Saharan outpost, it was the beating heart of the Songhai Empire, where commerce flowed as steadily as the great river itself. Picture the scene: Tuareg salt caravans arriving after 60 days crossing the desert, their camels' hides caked with white dust from the mines of Tagheza, while merchants from Timbuktu jostled with jeweler traders to inspect the cargo. Each slab of rock salt, roughly cut into rectangles the size of a man's torso, would be traded weight for weight for gold mined from the Bambuk fields, creating an economy where seasoning food carried the same value as royalty's ransom. What set Gao apart wasn't just its location, but its ruthless efficiency in controlling the three pillars of trans-Saharan trade. The city's Askia rulers didn't merely tax goods passing through, they institutionalized the exchange. Royal inspectors stamped gold ingots with official seals, guaranteeing purity and weight, while specialized slave markets operated with chilling precision. Unlike the chaotic auctions of Zanzibar, Gao's human merchandise was graded by skill set. Fulani herders for tending livestock, Songhai scribes for administrative work, and Kanyuri warriors for palace guards. Each category priced accordingly in cowrie shells, the empire's small change currency imported from the Maldives. The real innovation lay in Gao's credit system. Islamic merchant houses operated advanced banking networks where a trader could deposit gold in Timbuktu and withdraw its equivalent in Sijil Masa on the Mediterranean coast, all through handwritten saftaja letters of credit that functioned like medieval travelers' checks. A single surviving ledger from the 16th century details loans equivalent to 20 million modern dollars, complete with interest calculations based on lunar months and risk assessments for caravan routes. This financial sophistication stunned visiting Arab scholars. The historian Al-Sadi marveled at judicial cases where contracts were enforced based on testimony from illiterate witnesses who memorized terms through oral recitation. Gao's intellectual hunger matched its commercial appetite. When the legendary Askia Mohammed took power in 1493, he didn't just expand trade routes, he transformed the city into a learning hub. His pilgrimage to Mecca wasn't merely spiritual, it was a talent acquisition mission. Returning with scholars from Cairo and architects from Al-Andalus, he commissioned the Sankor Mosque not as a copy of Middle Eastern designs, but as a distinctly Songhai fusion where Sudanese mud brick met intricate Maghrebite geometric patterns. The mosque's library became a crossroads of ideas, housing Greek philosophy texts translated into Arabic alongside local histories recorded in Ajami script, Arabic alphabet adapted for African languages. The city's decline carries tragic irony. Just as Gao reached its zenith, Moroccan invaders armed with European arquebuses shattered Songhai's dominance in 1591. But walk the dusty streets of modern Gao's old quarter, and you'll find artisans still crafting leather goods using 16th century techniques, their stalls shaded by the same acacia trees that once sheltered gold-weighing ceremonies. The Niger still flows unchanged past the crumbling tomb of Askia Mohammed, a pyramidal structure that defiantly mimics the desert's salt mountains. Gao's ultimate lesson endures: rivers may dictate the flow of trade, but human ambition determines where the real wealth accumulates. Beneath the muddy banks of Sumatra's Musi River lies the ghost of an empire that conquered without castles, a kingdom built not on stone but on tides and treaties. Srivijaya thrived for 6 centuries as history's greatest invisible superpower, its dominion stretching from the Malay Peninsula to Western Java without leaving so much as a ruined wall. This wasn't an empire of monuments, it was a floating leviathan of commerce, its influence rippling across the Indian Ocean through a web of harbor masters, pirate alliances, and ritualized diplomacy. Picture the scene: Chinese junks and Arab dhows bobbing in the estuary shallows, their captains paying harbor gifts of silk and sandal wood to tattooed officials who spoke a dozen languages fluently because in Srivijaya, diplomacy was the ultimate currency. The secret to this maritime phantom's dominance: choke point economics. The Malacca and Sunda Straits were the double-barreled bottleneck of global trade. Any ship sailing between China and India had to pass through these narrow channels. Srivijaya's rulers stationed floating garrisons at both entrances, not to wage war but to offer protection contracts. A merchant could either pay modest tolls for safe passage and access to Srivijaya's network of repair docks and freshwater depots, or risk piracy in uncharted waters. Archaeologists found the receipts, 7th century lead ingots stamped in Old Malay script, each denoting payment for harbor services, essentially the world's first maritime insurance policies. Yet the real genius lay in spiritual arbitrage. When Chinese Buddhist pilgrim Yijing stopped here in 671, he didn't just find a trade hub. He discovered a religious crossroads where Vajrayana monks debated Hindu ship captains under palm-thatched pavilions. Srivijaya's kings transformed their capital at Palembang into a Buddhist scholarship magnet, funding monasteries that attracted thinkers from Nalanda to Baghdad. The strategy was brilliant. By positioning themselves as guardians of sacred knowledge, they ensured pilgrim ships carried not just monks, but cargo holds stuffed with luxury goods. A single Buddhist text shipped to China might be wrapped in Sumatran camphor-scented cloth, accompanied by a cask of rare nutmeg butter, all taxable commodities. The empire's cultural footprint survives in the quirks of modern Malay. The word "dunya" world comes from Srivijaya's maritime lingua franca, a linguistic cocktail of Sanskrit, Old Javanese, and Tamil. Even the humble banana leaf tells a story. Srivijayan merchants popularized its use as disposable food packaging from Madagascar to Okinawa, creating an early example of eco-friendly takeout. Then came the ecological coup de grace. Core samples from the Musi Delta reveal layers of sediment packed with rotted wood and corroded iron nails, the remnants of Srivijaya's legendary floating villages. When climate shifts in the 11th century altered river currents, the very waterways that nourished the empire became its burial shroud. Without a single invading army, the world's most sophisticated nautical state simply drifted into myth, leaving behind not crumbled temples, but something far more enduring: the blueprint for how to rule an empire without ever building a throne. Teotihuacan's obsidian blades gleamed like black lightning in the hands of warriors and butchers, their razor edges sharper than modern surgical steel, a technological marvel that transformed this Mexican highland city into the silent powerhouse of ancient Mesoamerica. Unlike the boastful Maya stelae or Aztec codices, Teotihuacan left no deciphered writings, letting its trade network speak volumes instead. Beneath the looming pyramids of the sun and moon, archaeologists have unearthed workshops where generations of artisans knapped volcanic glass into weapons, mirrors, and ritual objects with assembly line precision, fueling an economic empire that stretched from Guatemalan jungles to New Mexican deserts. The key to their dominance lay in geography and geology. Teotihuacan sat atop the Otumba and Pachuca obsidian deposits, two of the largest and highest quality sources in North America. The green gold Pachuca variety, in particular, became the city's signature export, prized for its uniform texture and conchoidal fracturing that allowed paper-thin edges. But this wasn't just about raw material. Teotihuacano craftsmen developed proprietary heat-treating techniques, heating nodules in kilns at precise temperatures to reduce fractures. The result, blade cores that could be pressed into hundreds of standardized tools, ancient mass production that supplied everything from sacrificial knives to domestic scrapers across the continent. Trade routes tell the story of Teotihuacan's invisible influence. In the Maya city of Tikal, over 800 miles away, royal tombs contain Teotihuacan-style obsidian daggers worn as status symbols, their edges still bloodied from ritual use. At Colorado's Mesa Verde, researchers found thin-sectioned Teotihuacan obsidian mixed with local varieties, suggesting a relay system where goods changed hands across generations of traders. Most telling are the caches at New Mexico's Choco Canyon, prismatic blades identical to those from central Mexico, carefully wrapped in macaw feathers that themselves were likely traded up from Mesoamerica. Yet Teotihuacan's real genius was in value-added products. Beyond simple blades, the city exported polished obsidian mirrors backed with pyrite mosaics, shamanic tools so revered they've been found in elite burials as far north as Wisconsin. Their craftsmen even developed a form of obsidian money, a standardized bip-pointed blades resembling miniature footballs that circulated like currency. Chemical fingerprinting reveals these blanks traveled hundreds of miles before being finished locally, proving Teotihuacan controlled not just trade, but the very concept of value across regions. The city's collapse around 550 of the Common Era only magnified its legacy. In the vacuum left by its fall, obsidian from rival sources like Michoacan's Ucaro flooded old trade routes, yet artisans for centuries still imitated Teotihuacan's distinctive prismatic blade style. Even the Aztecs, who discovered the ruins over 800 years later, believed this was the place where the gods had created the sun and moon, a fitting tribute to a city that once illuminated half a continent with the cold black fire of volcanic glass. Today, walking the street of the dead beneath the Pyramid of the Sun, you can still find flecks of obsidian glittering in the soil like frozen shadows, silent witnesses to an empire built not on conquest, but on the meticulous control of light and darkness, edge and reflection. The same volcanic glass that brought down sacrificial victims still speaks across millennia, cutting through time as cleanly as it once sliced through flesh and history. These cities were never isolated stars, but constellations in a vast celestial map of commerce, linked by threads of human ingenuity stretching across deserts, oceans, and mountain passes. The Silk Road wasn't a single path, but a pulsating network. Chinese silk might travel via Persian middlemen to Roman aristocrats, while Indian spices detoured through Ethiopian ports before reaching Venetian kitchens. Every trade route functioned like a relay race. In Palmyra, caravans transferred goods from Arabian camels to Syrian donkeys. In Calicut, Malayalam pepper changed hands from Gujarati ships to Arab dhows. The real magic happened at the crossroads where routes overlapped. Samarkand's markets buzzed with conversations between Tibetan musk traders and Greek physicians, while Alexandria's docks saw Spanish silver wade against Sumatra's cinnamon. What truly globalized this ancient economy wasn't just the movement of goods, but the standardization of trust. From Baghdad's meticulously minted silver dirhams to the cowrie shells that served as currency from West Africa to China's Yunnan province, traders developed universal value systems. The Hanseatic League's shipping contracts included clauses valid from Novgorod to Bruges, just as Swahili merchants used Arabic legal documents enforceable from Kilwa to Aden. Even measurement systems converged. The Bahar unit for spices standardized transactions across Malacca, Hormuz, and Cairo. These connections birthed history's first multinational corporations. The Assyrian Karam trading posts in Anatolia operated like Bronze Age franchised stores, while the Medicis later ran Europe's first branch banks from London to Constantinople. The Venetian galley system functioned as a state-run logistics company, with scheduled convoys mirroring modern shipping lanes. Meanwhile, the Tamil guilds of southern India placed agents in Java and Cambodia, their stone inscriptions detailing profit-sharing agreements across thousands of miles. The routes themselves evolved with stunning adaptability. When Mongol conquests made overland travel safer in the 13th century, the Silk Road flourished only for the Black Death to later cripple it, spurring maritime innovation. The monsoon winds, once obstacles, became nature's free shipping lanes once Arab and Indian sailors mastered their seasonal patterns. Even environmental shifts played a role. The drying of the Saraswati River around 1900 before the Common Era pushed Harappan traders toward Persian Gulf routes instead. Cultural exchange moved faster than the goods themselves. The earliest noodles appeared in both China and the Mediterranean simultaneously, while blue and white ceramics developed in Persia inspired Ming Dynasty porcelain that later circled back to Istanbul. Musical instruments like the Central Asian lute became the European oud, then the Spanish guitar. Perhaps most profound was the silent trade of ideas. Buddhist mantras carved onto Egyptian amulets, Greek astronomy preserved in Arabic texts before returning to Europe centuries later. Yet these networks had their dark undercurrents. The same routes that carried silks and philosophy also transported enslaved people and plagues. The Roman appetite for Indian pepper drained imperial coffers of silver, while the demand for Arctic walrus ivory fueled Norse expansion into vulnerable Greenland settlements. Even something as seemingly innocent as the amber trade, those golden Baltic gemstones cherished from Mycenae to Xi'an, required backbreaking labor from miners whose stories never made it into the royal treasuries. The ultimate testament to this globalization lies in the mundane. A single shipwreck off Java contained Iranian glassware, Maldivian cowrie shells, and Cambodian bronze statues, a typical merchant's mixed cargo. Everyday words still carry these ancient connections. Sugar derives from Sanskrit through Arabic and medieval Latin, while tea spread via both overland chai and maritime tea routes. These cities didn't just trade commodities, they swapped fragments of their souls, weaving a tapestry so dense that 5,000 years later, we still trace our world's foundations in their footsteps. The echoes of these ancient trade cities reverberate through our modern world in ways both obvious and surprising. Their fingerprints smudged across everything from stock market algorithms to the spice blends in your kitchen cabinet. The very concept of a globalized economy didn't emerge from a vacuum. It was forged in the bazaars of Aleppo, the counting houses of Bruges, and the harbor offices of Hangzhou. Consider this: the word tariff comes from the Arabic tarifa, coined in the customs halls of medieval Tunis, while the double-entry bookkeeping that underpins modern finance was perfected by Venetian merchants tracking silk and spice deals. These cities didn't just move goods, they invented the systems that still govern how capital flows today. Urban planners still study the hydraulic genius of Anka's reservoirs and canals, realizing belatedly that its collapse holds warnings for modern megacities battling climate change. The same dendritic street patterns that funneled traders through Damascus souks now appear in the pedestrianized shopping districts of Barcelona and Tokyo. Even our obsession with waterfront property traces back to these hubs, whether it's luxury condos on Manhattan's Hudson River or Dubai's artificial islands. They're all spiritual descendants of Mohenjo-Daro's dockyards and Venice's Grand Canal real estate. Cultural exchange, turbocharged by commerce, birthed hybrid identities that feel strikingly contemporary. The Nyonya cuisine of Malacca, a fusion of Chinese wok techniques and Malay spices, anticipated today's food trucks serving kimchi tacos or currywurst burritos. The multilingual merchant signs of ancient Palmyra would feel right at home in modern Singapore or Los Angeles. Even globalization's darker chapters, like Zanzibar's role in the slave trade, find eerie parallels in today's debates over ethical supply chains and tech manufacturing. Perhaps most profound is how these cities mastered the art of soft power long before the term existed. Srivijaya's Buddhist universities made it indispensable to intellectual exchange, much like Silicon Valley's tech campuses today. The Hanseatic League's trade embargoes foreshadowed modern economic sanctions, while Carthage's maritime insurance deals previewed London's Lloyd's of London. Their greatest lesson, true influence, isn't just about controlling territory, it's about controlling the channels through which ideas and value flow. Walk through any modern financial district, the glass towers of Shanghai, the neo-Gothic banks of Frankfurt, and you're seeing the spiritual heirs of these ancient hubs. The shouting traders on Wall Street owe their theatrics to the coffeehouse auctions of Ottoman Aleppo, while the blockchain revolution channels the same disruptive energy that Venetian merchants unleashed when they pioneered letters of credit. Even our struggles feel familiar. Income inequality haunted Rome just as it does New York, and the environmental toll of overconsumption toppled Easter Island as surely as it threatens us now. The ghosts of these cities whisper a challenge across the centuries. They proved that diversity fuels innovation. Samarkand's astronomers and Tenochtitlan's botanical gardens thrived by embracing foreign knowledge. But they also warn that no empire, however ingenious or wealthy, is immune to overreach. As we navigate our own era of digital marketplaces and climate crises, their ruins stand as both inspiration and caution, blueprints for building societies that trade not just goods but wisdom. From the sun-baked streets of Uruk to the mist-shrouded canals of Hoi An, these 35 cities prove one undeniable truth: trade wasn't just an economic activity. It was the loom on which the fabric of civilization was woven. Consider how a single commodity like pepper could link Malabar coast farmers to Venetian bankers, or how jade from Guatemala shaped rituals in both Maya temples and Chinese imperial courts. Each city in our journey mastered a unique alchemy, turning geography into destiny, scarcity into innovation, and cultural collisions into artistic revolutions. What's astonishing isn't just the scale of these networks, but their diversity. Carthage thrived on ruthless monopolies, while Anuradhapura sanctified commerce with Buddhist ideals. Bruges invented modern finance using wool futures, while Cahokia's riverine trade moved not just goods but entire cosmological ideas. Some cities, like Venice and Mogadishu, rose by controlling choke points. Others, like Teotihuacan and Great Zimbabwe, transformed local resources into universal currencies. Yet all shared one trait: they understood that trade routes aren't just paths for goods, but synapses firing in humanity's collective brain. These stories still resonate today. Walk through Istanbul's Grand Bazaar and you'll hear echoes of Constantinople's polyglot merchants. Sample Amani halwa and taste the same cardamom-infused sweetness that once fueled Indian Ocean negotiations. Even our digital age mirrors these ancient patterns: algorithmic stock trades replacing camel caravans, fiber optic cables doing what monsoon winds once did for Sri Lankan cinnamon. Here's your invitation. Look closer at your own surroundings. That nondescript riverbank nearby might have hosted medieval fish markets. The old warehouse district could trace its roots to colonial spice traders. Or visit these legendary sites yourself. Stand where Phoenicians weighed Tyrian purple dye in Cadiz, or touch the bullet-riddled walls of Jede where Swahili merchants once traded monsoon secrets. Every place has a commercial heartbeat if you listen closely enough. The greatest lesson these cities teach, prosperity built on exchange, leaves deeper marks than conquest ever could. Pyramids crumble and empires fade, but the memory of a good deal, whether sealed with handshakes in Bruges or cocoa beans in Tenochtitlan, lingers in the stones, the recipes, and the stories we still tell. So next time you sip coffee grown continents away or admire a trinket from some distant shore, remember, you're participating in the same ancient dance of connection that once raised cities from deserts, jungles, and even the sea itself.